Today we have Lejourn. I hope I got the name correctly. Today we have Lejourn to talk to us on the psychology of UX design. Lejourn is a product designer and researcher focused on delivering human-centered designs and business-driven solutions with transformative user experiences. So, Lejourn, I think you are here. The floor is yours. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah. Hi, good evening. Thank you, Figure, for that. Okay. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Am I visible? Hello, you could identify me if you see my screen. Okay, awesome. So psychology in UX design. So my name is Samuel. It's a Samuel. Most of my online presence would be with Lejourn. I also act as a technical product lead um, in my work. And for me, with psychology in UX, it's kind of a topic that I hold personally close, because I like to understand, my users, in every possible way. And, with psychology, you're then able to design to those users' biases and heuristics. Okay. So, first off, why is psychology in UX design? Why is it important? So, first question would be: it is important because humans are complicated, and according to the American Psychological Association, psychology is the study of the mind and behavior of people. It is the study of the mind, how it works, and how it affects behavior. And with that, we would ask, what then is psychology in UX design? And psychology in UX design is about understanding user behaviors, their biases, heuristics, and interactions with the products to enable, capture of attention towards a desired outcome with this knowledge. So with psychology, we are trying to really understand the people who use, our products, with the intention of capturing their attention towards a desired outcome. And with this knowledge, we can make experiences to be more intuitive and human-centered by understanding the psychology of the people who would be using these products. So, first of all, I want to speak on, some heuristics that we know, and they kind of link them to some of their psychological concepts. So first of all, Hicks law, it states the time it takes for a user to make a decision increases with the number and complexity of options available. And Hicks law basically tells us that when you have more options, you logarithmically increase the time it would take for a user to make a decision on that particular page or product. So some takeaways that we can have from this would be, one, we want to minimize choices, especially when response time is critical, to increase the decision-making time for users. We want to break complex tasks into smaller steps, in order to decrease that cognitive load also. So from the illustrations that we have to on the right-hand side, we have seeing the groceries, the list, and then having them also tabulated for quick sorting. So this kind of defines Hicks law in a way, being that we are seeing information less, and that we are able to sort through this information quickly. And so if we go and we see that the psychological concepts that this is tied to is the cognitive load. So the cognitive load generally refers to the used amount of information in working memory one can hold at one time. In user experience, the cognitive load imposed by a product is the amount of mental resources that are required to operate that system. So when we think about it, cognitive load, the amount of resources that we could dedicate to trying to carry out a particular operation or action or task within a product. And very much like computers, human brains have a limited amount of processing power. When the amount of information coming in exceeds our ability to handle it, our performance suffers. We may take longer to understand this information. We may miss important details, or not even get overwhelmed and totally abandon the task. And I think if we have read the Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, he's one who has made an impact, on the application of cognitive load theory to web design. And here are some of my own favorite lines from his book, which he says, every page should be self-explanatory because users are just as likely to enter your website from the middle as from the home page. Usability is adequate when a person of average ability or experience can user has to uh, so every time the user has to think while using a product, even for an instance, their working memory is way down. So questions like, is this clickable? Where's the home button? How do I save? All of these kind of questions can ruin a user's experience through a product. And some common causes of cognitive overload would be for one, unnecessary actions. So where we have every action that the user takes adds to their working memory. So when we have too many unnecessary actions, user thoughts become derailed or become irritated because the user is focused on accomplishing a specific goal. Therefore, having unnecessary actions pressures the user into putting more effort, which means dedicating more working memory to that task for no good reason. Some other causes of same cognitive overload would be overstimulation, which could deal with visual clutter on a product or a service. Three could also be having too many options, which is a heuristic of fixed flow, as we stated earlier. Four is also too much content, probably providing too much information within a particular page. Ambiguous interfaces. So this deals with having an interface where a user has to is confused on what a particular button is exactly supposed to do or where this is supposed to lead to. And also six, internal inconsistencies. So having an action happen this way or a CTA shown this way and then shown completely different somewhere else. This could cause inconsistencies that would cause a user to think more about a particular process that they were going through, and therefore they are then dedicating more working memory to understand what is going on within this system. So we minimize cognitive load to maximize usability. As the total cognitive load or amount of mental processing power needed to use your products affects how easily users find content or complete tasks. So the less users have to, place more information in their working memory while going through your product, the easier it is for users to find what they want and also be able to complete tasks within that product. So some, this more of a physical product example that we could have where we have the universal remote on the left, and then, we could see with that remote that even an adept user of said remotes sometimes, would still struggle with the overload of buttons we have on these remotes in trying to find a particular function. Basically brought out, what we have here in the middle with the grandparents remote as stated, where, we have only the needed functions and the rest of the buttons have been taped out to sort of reduce, the clutter and the load of having to look through each buttons and selecting which you particularly want. And then on the right, we have the newer remotes that we have on more recent smart TVs that particularly focuses on the buttons that we make use of, the volume, the channel, and on and off, and thereby reducing the visual clutter and the cognitive load it takes for users while using this product. Um, so same, we also have with Google. So when we go to the Google's landing page, we can see that Google, it has basically remained unchanged for, I think, basically since inception. And we see that the heading over to Google really takes away as much cognitive load from a user as possible by providing the only action of a user would be coming to Google to carry, which is to search a particular query. So you have, when you load up Google, the only thing you see it's the Google and then the text field to input and carry that particular action without any other thing having to take away or use more of your working memory at the time. It's after you carry out that action of searching for your particular query, then you are thrown more information on what you have searched for, thereby progressively loading the user into the product. So one design exercise there we could help that we could carry out to kind of um, make our reduce our cognitive loads on users. One of these exercises is the card sorting. It's a UX research technique to evaluate and generate ideas for the information architecture. That's what I have as IA. And it's great to figure out how items are perceived um, how items are perceived to be organized, sorry, by people, by having participants organize topics within groups or categories that makes the most sense to them. So it's basically having participants selected or probably an open session for participants to comment, and then they are able to categorize topics that you would have created into categories. So you see how people actually perceive these topics to be grouped together. So the next heuristics that we will talk about would be Jacob's law. And Jacob's law says that people spend most of their time with or on other products or services. This means that people will prefer your product service to work the same way as all the other products that they already know. This was said by Jacob Nielsen. And some of the highlights that we could take from this are: one, users would transfer expectations that they have built around one familiar product to another that appears similar. Two, by leveraging existing mental models, we can create superior user interfaces with users focused on their tasks rather than learning a new model. And if we go ahead with this heuristic, the psychological concept tied to this would be the mental model. And a mental model is what the user believes about the system at hand, that if we define it enclosed within design. And a mental model for us is what we think we know about the system, especially about how it works. It's how we use the knowledge we already have from past experiences with interacting with something new. And some key points to know really about mental models are: one, that a mental model is a belief and not facts. It's a model of what users or what people know or think they know about a product or a service. Users tend to base their predictions about the product on their mental models, and thus they plan their next actions based on how that product communicate the system's basic nature. well enough that users form, reasonable, thus useful mental models around that product. And individuals, that's the second point that we should take through from mental model, is that individuals each have their own mental model. So a mental model is internal to each user's brain, and different users might construct different mental models of the same products. So further, one big dilemma is the common gap between designers and users' mental models. Because designers know so much, and they begin to form these wonderful mental models of their own creations. And this might cause them to believe that the product or feature that they have designed is easy to understand, and that might really not be the case without understanding that each of us have our mental models of how a particular product should behave. So what users believe they know about a product or service strongly impacts how they use it. So mismatched mental models are common, especially with designs that really try something new. So how do we act on mental models? So for us to act on mental models would be one, we are making the system conform. So we conform to users' mental models. Assuming most models are similar, this approach is recommended, by fixing, say, the our information architecture problems. If people, for example, if people look for something in the wrong place, they move it to the place where people look for it. So this is kind of conforming to the user's own mental model. And two would be to improve users' mental models so that they can more accurately reflect and match your system. So you could do this by explaining things better, making labels clearer, having an appropriate onboarding to make the system or make the product more transparent. And even though the underlying system remains unchanged, this is improving the user's own mental models to match the system. So thinking aloud method of user testing can give insights into a user's mental model. When users verbalize what they think, believe, and predict while they use your design, you can piece together much of their mental model. So some examples that we could give of some of our human mental models, and how that translates also to into um, interface design. So with that, we could see that on the left we have a NASA control panel, and for the launch station, and then on the right we have kind of buttons from a design system for inputs, check boxes, and radio buttons. And we could see how the mental model of these interface designs were kind of drawn from where on the left with the control panel, we have, the switches where we flip the switch, or we push a button, or we turn a particular control. And it's from that same mental model of how these things work, or how we, make these changes or these switches on this system, that was then also brought into, we interface design, where we have the checkbox or the radio button, or the switch. So it's that same meta model that allows us to quickly flow into this product without any friction with our own usage, because this is how we understand these things to work. Similarly, we have on e-commerce, with e-commerce nowadays, we so easily would go into an e-commerce platform and almost seamlessly use that platform due to mental models that we've established about how that is supposed to work. And so with one, also drawing from the physical mental model into the interface would be for the shopping carts. So we all know when you go to a supermarket to shop, you have the shopping cart, and then you get products that you want. And when you gather those products together, then you go ahead and you get to check out with those particular products. So same mental model was also drawn into interface design. where you head out to an e-commerce and then you get the cart where you select products that you want to buy, and all those products are added to your cart, and then you get to check out. And so it's that same mental model that we have of going to a physical e-commerce websites, and that's why it also creates this really fast or frictionless flow from a store, from a live store to a store that you would go to on your PC or laptop or phone anywhere. So one design exercise that we could use in capturing or understanding better, mental models of our user would be personas. So the point of references, personas are points of references that help define people or our users, and it's really incredibly valuable for teams. It helps everyone move away from self-referential and own mental model thinking. That is thinking from your own mental model, and focus on the needs and goals of the user, which is useful in determining the direction or improving the experience of a product. And so with personas is basically getting to know the mental models, as I said, which could be captured with thinking aloud testing, which is basically what they think while using your product, how they predict something should behave. This is understanding their own mental models. So as a final statement here is you really can't fully understand the needs of your users without actually speaking to them. So the final heuristic that we would talk about would be on the peak end rule. So the peak end rule says people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak and at its end, rather than the total sum or average of every moment of the experience. So some key points that we could take away from here would be that one, with on the peak end rule, we want to identify the moments when your product is most helpful, valuable, or entertaining, and designed to the delight of the end user. A second key point would be that remember that people recall negative experiences more vividly than positive ones. And with picking up with psychological concept, it is tied to is the cognitive bias. And cognitive biases are systematic errors of thinking or rationality and judgments that influence our perception of the world or our decision-making ability. They work like shortcuts that increase our efficiency to make quick decisions without the need to thoroughly analyze the situation. So our cognitive biases, you could say, these are basically on auto run. We are always making a decision. We make thousands of decisions every day. Um, when you step out, you make a decision. When you decide what direction you want to look at, that's a decision you're making. When you decide what foot you want to go first because you want to take a step forward, that's a decision you've made. And all these decisions are decisions we make unconsciously. Because if our brains were wired to make these decisions consciously, we wouldn't really be able to get anything done. So we make these decisions with our cognitive biases, rationally based on our judgments or our perception of the world. And cognitive biases also changes the way we remember circumstances, because our brains cannot remember the details of every experience we face. Our brains then find ways of having more efficient ways to process the many data that we could encounter at any given time. And since we are limited in the amount of details our memories can hold, to compensate for this, we then have our tendency of recalling the peak experiences or highlights as well as the endings of a particular experience. So also, designers are vulnerable to the same cognitive biases as users. The context, because the context which you present a problem can already bias your design choices. And some of these biases are things that we might not even recognize we currently have. and it could deal with having a bias for um, how an information is shown to you, or particularly avoiding certain information that doesn't and other biases also with I think there are several biases on if you go under the cognitive bias, we have like a whole long list again of heuristics under the psychological principle of cognitive biases that support there's so many that you could have. So that's why it's always really important to um, understand how users and how the kind of decisions that they could make that would influence their experiences with a product. So an experiment was carried out on, humans with the pick and rule in preference to understand how humans process an experience. So two trials, participants were brought, into um, for the trials to be carried out. And so the first trial had the participants submerge a hand in 14 degrees Celsius of water for 60 seconds. 14 degrees Celsius is quite cold. And they submerged their for about 1 minute. And the second trial had the same subject submerge the other hand in same 14 degrees Celsius for 60 seconds, but then keep their hand submerged for an additional 30 seconds. But for this additional 30 seconds that they kept their hands submerged, the temperature was raised from 14 degrees to 15 degrees. And after this was carried out, the subjects were then asked which trials they would prefer to repeat. And despite the prolonged exposure of trial two, because there's an additional 30 seconds of exposure to said cold water, participants still preferred the second trial over the first because of the sensations or the experiences that they had with that trial towards the end of it. So they had, more of a positive lift through that experience where they had the water, slightly warmed from 14 degrees to 15 degrees. So this goes to show us how users, have a more retentive information towards the end of a particular experience than the total accumulation of an entire experience of a product. And so one also example, a big example we could give was with Uber. And for Uber, they had the user pain points of users coming into the application, and when they book a ride, quite some time when they book a ride, they there's a lot of drop off rates, being that users weren't really at that moment they were really engaged with what was supposed to be happening, how long was the ride taking. Some questions that they were having will lead to drop off rates of these users from the application after booking a ride. And with this, Uber then thought of how they could make sure they capitalize on that particular stage of users while using their products. And that's when we again had the showing where the boat is, showing more information about the driver, kind of creating it, making it a bit more interactive for users, while they wait for the car to arrive. They could see where the car is, they could see how long it will take for that car to get to them, and all that information. So with that, it then helped, in reducing user drop rates when they get to this, particular stage of waiting for that product. So with that, they are able to capitalize on user on giving user kind of I would say like a transcending experience with the product, to kind of interact with the product in that way of waiting for a cab and then being assured of where this cab is before it gets to them. So one design exercise that we could use with cognitive bias would be Journeymaps. So Journeymaps help provide valuable visualizations of how people use a product or service through the narrative of accomplishing a goal. You can see one really important detail about Journeymaps is that you can see the emotional peak and valleys of the experience overall. So you can see, where you want to mitigate some points, some pain points, or where you want to emotional peak to from there improve kind of the overall user experience of that product. So journey maps are really important, especially with trying to understand, the highs and lows of the user within your product or service, and how you could capitalize on each of those points within that product. So also, one thing also that must be stated, especially with handling with understanding the psychology of humans in how we design our products, would be with great power comes responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility. And it's important that we consider how products and services have the potential to compromise the goals of people using them. And some use cases for this are
Samuel, are you there? I think we've lost your audio.
behavior by doing something. We're doing this over and over again, and the rewards change because we could refresh, and we could refresh and see a new tweet, or refresh and get a new like, or refresh and get a new follower, or like from a follower, and it's a different information, or different rewards that we could get from every refresh or every pull down of the Twitter, that then creates this compulsive behavior that might also particularly become addictive to the products. And with this thus underlining or compromising the goals of users, because the users might tend to spend more time that they would want on that particular product. Also, some examples would be also with YouTube's autoplay or Netflix. So this could make people spend more time and than they want on the product. Even though these features, yes, are particularly make life a whole lot easier, being that people don't have to generally interact with the screen to play the next video or movie. But this could then lead to people spending more time, which could have a negative experience. Being that if someone became of the opinion that say Netflix or YouTube was taking up so much of his time, then it could lead to that user drop off, and trying to shut off or uninstall that particular application or product, being to how much it has consumed his time, or compromise his goals of using the product in the first place. And also, I think one really major thing I could say with great power has been for the with likes that we have on social media. So with likes, it tends to give us the human. We all naturally have the human need for social confirmation. So with the like button, people are able to feel like they're being more socially confirmed. And we particularly in certain generations where we can have users going, to extreme lengths to getting these likes, and it's kind of the psychology behind it of having these likes, giving that dopamine rush for each user, and as I mentioned, also that social confirmation that drives the need for users to go to the extreme for said rush in using that particular service. And it really, really, I really cannot stress how important it is enough to understand that we understanding the psychology of how humans interact with our products. We have to be able to know that we particularly possess somewhat of a power of influencing their decisions, of how they make these decisions on our products, or influencing their choices or using a bias to kind of guide their decisions towards making towards a specified goal that we want for them or we have set out for them. And so with this knowledge, we want to make sure that we are providing as much value for the users as possible in our products, in trying to make sure that we're not building addictive and compulsive behaviors of users within our products. Okay, and yeah, and thank you for that. So, if you have any, questions that you could throw to for as we work on through psychology in UX design.
All right, thank you very much, Lejourn, for that amazing presentation. I actually learned a lot of things I didn't know about before today, so thank you very much. So I have a question here with me. It says, you mentioned hysterics a couple of times. Can you shed a bit more light on hysterics?
Okay, so if you say that I mentioned, as I mentioned, it's we understanding human hysterics, processes, or you could say like rules on how people probably make certain decisions or why they do certain things. And there are actually, there's a lot of heuristics for people, and some of which we have also mentioned that happens to do with basically the psychology of how these people or how people work. And so with heuristics and I think what would say is that for this there's a lot of heuristics that guide how users behave the way they do, and in relation to design, some of which are their cognitive experiences, I said, like the cognitive bias and the peak end rule. So this is always we just it's rules on why people behave the way they do. So when we know most of them, or when we are able to design our products to fit the heuristics of our end users, we kind of create products to match their goals or adapt to the way they do certain things or and why they do them.
Hello, Lejourn.
Hi,
Good evening.
hello. Yeah, good evening.
My name is Brian, and my question is on mental models about what Jacob's law, basically under Jacob's law. So,
Yeah.
how do you like differentiate between copying a product and making it like I'm building something different from it? Please, I would like to know, please.
Okay. So from the question, you say, how do you differentiate between copying a product and building something different from it?
Yes.
Uh, okay. So copying a product, I suppose, would be, say, possibly if you went over and you copied uh, the features of the product, how the product is supposed to work, how the product looks. Those could be classified as copying a product. But with mental models, it's basically you really do not copy mental models, but you kind of match mental models of what people um, perceive certain things to be. We all have a mental model of how e-commerce is. I think basically, if you open any e-commerce website, you have a mental model of how it's supposed to work. And so when you go to an e-commerce website and then you see something totally different from this mental model, it then creates that shift in you, where you are then trying to understand how the product is supposed to work. So with copying mental models, we actually copy mental models a lot. It's replicated a lot throughout the entire industry. As I mentioned, for e-commerce currently, where everybody has a understands how e-com is supposed to work. So no matter how really new or how you want to change a certain process, that mental model of how it's supposed to work remains the same. So copying, you really can't copy a mental model, and because mental model doesn't just apply, as I mentioned, it's really individualistic. Everybody would have a view of mental model attached to their own brains for how they view a product. But there's always a wide spectrum of
I think our speaker is having some network issues. Let's hold on a bit for him to join back.
Okay, no problem. We just stand by and waiting.
sorry. Okay. My network cut me out there. Hello, Brian. I hope I did answer your question there.
Yes, you did. You did. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, Sam. I don't know if you can actually repeat yourself because I could not hear you. I'm very interested in that question, please.
Okay. So the question was, we're asking how do we know if we can copy the mental model. Um, my response to that was, mental models are kind of the ideas that we form around how certain things are supposed to work. And as I mentioned, mental models are not facts, but more or less of our beliefs of how a service should work based on maybe past experiences or number of probably other information that we might have taken in. And so with a mental model, we want to always try to understand how certain um, things are done or how certain things are perceived within a particular niche when we design products into those niche. So I use an example of an e-commerce, for example, where if you go into an e-commerce site or website currently, there's a certain way that you would expect it to work. You know that you want to go through a list of products. You know that you want to select a product. You know that you want to, go to your cart and then check out and make payments. But when you then go to an e-commerce that totally that doesn't conform to that particular mental model that that you have of how e-commerce is supposed to work, it kind of then creates a friction in the user experience of that product. Say maybe when you go to an e-commerce and it possibly asks you maybe it shows you a picture of a product, and then you just have to click and put your credit card details, or just make the experience a bit jarring, that you then then questioning your mental model of how this is supposed to work and trying to find out the next steps or actions to take. So with a mental model, yes, we actually do have to um, particularly build, no, I wouldn't say copy, but build with knowledge of the mental models of our users or the industry, or the various variables that will come into place with these mental models. But we have to design to these mental models to reduce friction with users or people within this service, and then focusing on actually achieving the tasks or goal that they have within that product, and less on understanding the new mental model of this product or service.
All right, thanks. Yeah, exactly what I wanted to hear. Right. I've actually been struggling with this. Like you did justice to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
thank
I
you
think
very much. Question here. Sorry, Lejourn, were you saying something?
I think I saw a question earlier in the chat, but I think my network has cleared that out. That I was going to respond to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the question was from Olusegun, and it says, thanks for the presentation, Lejeune. Just need a little more clarity of how user journey maps are created. Also, how do you know what feelings are activated as points in?
Okay, so I think the first question there is how user journey maps are created. And okay, so first, with user journey maps, it's kind of you want to understand, the entire flow of a user or a customer in achieving a particular goal. Commerce again. Having a user journey map would be understanding that how the user got into the product. Probably did he click on this to an ad, or you have a goal already that you've outlined on how this user comes in, and from clicking on that ad to coming into the product. Um, what they do. So this user wants to buy this shoe that he clicked on. So when he clicks on the shoe from the ad, he comes to the website. From the website, he selects the shoe to add to carts, and from add to carts to checkout, and then he makes the payment. So we can't then, with that flow, we kind of see the journey of the user through the product. And through that journey, we can then identify the scenarios, possibly the mindsets and or actions that that user would take in accomplishing that journey. And we could also identify opportunities for us to make that journey better. So we could identify that so this user possibly and then coming into the product and say we might want to present the opportunity here that we can also show users, products, similar products like this, or products that also look like this, or people also bought. This is an opportunity that we have presented to also kind of capitalize on that user's, journey into the product. We could also look at, say, if we had formally that you had to register while or before you buy a product. And so within the journey map of that, we would also know that users are generally not going to be so happy wanting to fill a form before they do certain things. So within that journey, we identify that okay, a user's mindset or emotion, within this particular or at this particular stage of the journey, isn't top notch. So probably to improve that would be by maybe pushing the form to a later moment in checkout, or maybe drastically reducing the amount of information you have to provide, or maybe instead of giving them a form, probably just give them to connect to their Google accounts. So it's kind of, you see that you could see the different emotions and or actions the user take throughout their entire journey. I kind of provide opportunities or take actions to match or capitalize on a peak point, or mitigate a value point within a customer's journey. I think I hope you understand also that with journey maps users. I think there's lots of templates online that you could use, but basically that is the understanding of how a journey map should work for the product.
All right, thank you very, very much for that. Does any other person have any other question? All right. In the absence of
Okay.
any questions, thank you once again, Lejourn, for joining us today to give us insights on user psychology, or sorry, on psychology in UX design. Um,
Thank you.
the recording will be on on the YouTube channel shortly after this shortly after this session, or at most by tomorrow on our YouTube channel. Lejeun's socials are on the chat in case you want to follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter. And Design with Ears socials are also there on the chat for you to follow us to get updates. We're going to be having another session next week, Sunday again. Thanks a lot for joining. See you next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. See ya.